Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Threads of Conversation. I'm your host, Georgia Graham, and on today's episode, I have Sam Trotman, founder of the Instagram account Samutaro, a page that focuses on style, art, and everything pop culture. In this episode, we discuss his background in trend forecasting and denim, and how his interest in subcultures led him to start one of the internet's most popular research platforms. You can read the accompanying newsletter, which is linked in the show notes. And if you enjoy the episode, don't forget to hit the heart button and subscribe for more Threads of Conversation. Alrighty, welcome to another episode of Threads of Conversation. I'm here with Sam Trotman, creator of the Samutaro Instagram account, and today we're going to discuss your career in fashion. So Sam, welcome to Threads of Conversation.
Thanks for having me on.
So I guess to start with, can you explain a bit about what you do and how you describe it?
I run an Instagram page called Samutaro, and it's kind of like, I guess, I cover like culture, fashion, art, and it's basically just a platform for me to kind of write about things that I'm interested in. Generally, it started as a passion project like about 5 or 6 years ago that I started just before the pandemic, and it just became sort of like a research platform where I was reading and writing a lot of sort of things that I was into, whether it was like fashion or subcultures and things like that, and the platform just became a way for me to kind of express those things that I was really interested in. I kind of started doing the long form captions, which weren't really like a thing, I guess, at the time when people were first sort of like creating these like archive based accounts. So that became kind of like a unique selling point, I think, for the page in terms of the storytelling and digging into like the context around kind of like culture and things like that, that just gave it a bit more of an edge, I guess, because a lot more pages were just sort of doing like carousels of images, whereas I really wanted to kind of focus more on like the storytelling and the meaning behind a lot of these things that are, like me and my audience care so much about.
And why did you decide to put it on Instagram as opposed to using like Tumblr or starting a blog?
Because that was just the platform I think everyone was using at that point. And the good thing with Instagram was just like there's such a big reach in terms of the audiences you can get for it. It could be like, I'd have Virgil Abloh like would be following me, but then there's like some kid who's maybe in Missouri in America or something like that. So there's such a big audience that you can tap into, and you can just research whatever you want on there. There's stuff that I'd find on fashion, but then there might be other obscure stuff that I read about that's nothing to do with fashion as well. And I think that's the good thing about Instagram. There's just everything you can have and you want on one page there. Yeah.
When you get followers like Virgil or some of the really big people that follow you, firstly, do you notice, or how long does it take you to notice? And secondly, do you feel like pressure?
Yeah, I remember like when I started getting some of the like bigger names or people that I'd been kind of following in sort of like fashion and culture and stuff, and like Virgil, for example, like rest in peace. But I hadn't noticed that he'd like followed me until one of my friends told me, and then I had to like check. I remember like looking and like searching in my followers, and then he'd popped up, and it was cool to see that he was paying attention. But I think he was just a really kind of influential person that was really tapped into the culture. So I don't know, it was obviously like amazing for me to have that opportunity that he was sort of following me and like obviously cared to like read my content, but there was so many other pages like mine that he was following as well. And I think like him, compared to other designers, he was really sort of tapped in and just sort of knew what was sort of happening in the culture, which was cool.
Yeah, I found it really moving after he died when so many people posted screenshots of like the DMs that he'd sent them.
Yeah. Because
he would get in touch with everyone, and he would say, really offer words of encouragement or say how much he liked what people were doing.
Yeah.
And it was just seeing that sort of all together, because obviously, after he passed, certainly my feed was really flooded with tributes, and I was like, wow, that is a really incredible legacy.
Yeah, because even if it's just like a small interaction, it just like means so much to someone, the fact that he gave you that time. I've had a few kind of exchanges with him where we discuss sort of certain sort of like topics and things like that, and even if it was like 10 minutes, I felt like bad that I was taking up his time, but he was just really up for the chat and just really kind of cared about it, which was cool. I think another one's like Takashi Murakami, like he'd been following me, I think since during the pandemic, and even though he's like a contemporary artist, he really kind of cares about fashion and does a lot of collaborations with like fashion brands and designers and things. And he'd said to me that he'd printed out all of my posts, I think, from like the past few years.
No way.
And we FaceTimed together, and he showed me in his studio that he had this like booklet of my posts because he wanted to learn more about fashion and like culture and stuff. So that was like another cool moment. And I actually got to meet him for the first time in Paris this season
nice.
for Fashion Week at the LV show. I was just outside recording guests sort of like coming in, and then he came up and I was just got like a video, and then I said, "Oh, it's Sam from Samutaro," and he's like, "Oh no way!" He's like,
"No
Samutaro. So it was just like this really cool exchange that we had then.
Yeah.
I knew that I'd probably meet him at some point around the world somewhere when I was sort of traveling, but yeah, it was just a really cool moment, and some photographers and like people with cameras like captured it, so it was cool just to have that little memento.
Yeah, for sure. And also such an authentic moment.
Exactly,
you know, especially in an environment where a lot is quite like engineered or staged. Like that must have been really special.
Yeah, because all the photographers there were just like, "Who's Samutaro?" Because I'm just like usually someone that's behind the scenes. I really kind of put myself out there and stuff. So yeah, it was just a funny moment.
Yeah. Do you think about that when you're creating your posts and things, as sort of how much to put yourself out there versus sort of stay behind the scenes?
Yeah.
Or...
When I first started posting, I did more like kind of just in stories, I guess. I'd like post little like fit pics and stuff. But as the account's grown, I just want to focus more on the content itself. But I think a lot of other pages, they stay anonymous. But because I guess I've worked in the industry for so long and I do like facing kind of stuff, whether it's like podcasts like these or presentations and stuff, I've never really been too sort of worried about like not having my face out there. And I found a lot of my audience, they do care about just like knowing that there is like a face behind it, because it's only me that actually does the content most of the time. I sometimes have contributors that help, but I'm the one who's posting like every day behind the account. So I think people like to know that there is a kind of face behind it like that.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the age of like AI generated. Sort of.
Exactly.
It's like, it's me. I'm real. Like, so you mentioned there your career in fashion and having been in the industry for a while. So I'd love to talk about basically how you got to where you are now. So what was your career trajectory?
So I guess my first kind of like introduction to fashion was I moved up to London to study fashion merchandising at Westminster University, and that was kind of just a way to get my kind of foot in the door, just like fashion. I didn't have any kind of like background experience in it before, so it was just a case of getting into it. Like fashion merchandising is like very numerical and using kind of like spreadsheets.
What is fashion merchandising?
It's like controlling like pricing and stock, like the kind of behind the scenes, so I guess like engineering how like a retailer works in terms of the stock and the pricing when sales go on and things like that. But it's not a really kind of creative role. But the course itself that we did, we covered quite a lot of different like topics within fashion. So that's what kind of got me into it. And I just figured if I just get some experience in fashion and get to London, then I'll just kind of figure it out from there. And luckily on the course we had some people that came in, did guest presentations, and one of them was a trend forecaster. And I wish I knew the guy's name, who it was, because he was the one that kind of like put me onto it. And I think it was just a moment where I was just like, wow, this is something that I really want to do, because like since I was younger, I'd always like be reading like skate magazines or like fashion magazines and watching TV and like music videos and just be following culture and stuff. And I'd always kind of be tracking what was sort of happening and joining the dots a little bit of what was sort of happening in culture. And then when the guy presented the trend forecasting things, I was just like, wow, this is something that I feel that I can like naturally kind of do, because I wasn't kind of creative enough to do design, but I loved like the writing aspect and then also the kind of story building, and that's what you do with trend forecasting. It's like you're giving the designers inspiration that they probably don't always have time to look at when they're doing their roles, and just sort of looking across like fashion culture, like the arts and things like that, and then saying these are kind of the patterns that are sort of happening. So I managed to get an internship when I did a study abroad over in New York, doing trend forecasting for a company called Style Site, and I worked with an editor there. And he just kind of like gave me sort of like free rein to sort of like explore different kind of like trends and things that were happening. And it was like New York Fashion Week when I was over there as well, so getting to go to some shows and really getting a taste for like what the job role was. And then when I came back to London, I managed to carry on the internship there until I finished my final year of uni, and then I worked for Style Site because they opened a London office. For like 4 years, and then they got a merger with WGSN, which is like another one of the biggest like trend forecasting agencies, and I was working with them doing denim and like youth culture content for like 7 years, I think. Which was like a super like fun role. We got to like travel to like festivals and like shoot street style there, or like fashion weeks, go to like trade shows, like catwalk kind of stuff. Like everything really, and you're basically just absorbing yourself in what's sort of happening in fashion and culture, and then you're building reports from those, kind of feeding information to the different brands.
Yeah, so I was going to say, what is the pipeline then for you create a trend report, and then who are the kind of people that is then sold to, and how do they use it? I'm interested in hearing your view on that side of things.
Yeah, so it's mainly like big, I'd say like corporate companies use it, but we did have like people like, it would go from like, I don't know, with Prada, we'd have like them as the client, but then it could go down to like Zara or something like that. And then they have different departments, so it's like men's, women's, they have interiors, and then I was on, denim and youth culture. So the reports, generally, we'd go out and I'd say, I don't know, if we're shooting a festival, we go out, shoot a festival in like a weekend, and then we turn it around like a few days, and then that would be out there for them to view on the platform. But it would, it's sort of paid, so it's behind like a paywalls. So it's only clients who have paid for it to get access to that. But it's cool because it's just like, we were very much at the forefront of what was sort of happening in sort of like fashion and culture with that. And it was kind of before, I guess, like Instagram, and there's like so many other platforms now that provide that information. So like back then it really was like a key resource for brands to use to kind of find out what's sort of happening. Because it's, even though we're providing like inspiration, it's also confirmation for some people, because obviously like designers are doing their own research, and then it's just like, I guess, a less of a gamble sometimes, and they might just have like an idea, and then if they see like we've done a report on it, then it's just like, okay, I know I'm on the right track, that we're thinking the same kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's always that you think you have an instinct, but you wonder whether it's just in your little bubble or it's just
and that's a lot of the time when we were doing like, say, the trend reports could range from like 6 months to like a forecast, which would be like a year and a half ahead. So sometimes it would be more, going on your intuition and sort of like figuring out what's sort of like happening in the landscape of fashion. Where the other ones, if we'd go and cover a trade show, like Fashion Week, say, it's very much just using what you're seeing there, and then in terms of like silhouettes or what designers are doing. Whereas the forecast ones, it takes a bit more kind of like foresight in terms of building the stories out and what those trends are going to be for the next few seasons.
How do you do that? Like, what's the process of essentially future gazing?
Yeah, I guess because we were constantly looking at what's happening in fashion, and who are the emerging designers coming out, and like what are the key silhouettes or like colours, or like say denim specifically, it'd be like wash and finish and the weaves and things like that. So we'd be looking at everything from going from fabric. That would be the first initial kind of thing of like looking what are the new kind of fabrics that are coming out, and that would always be 2 years ahead, so that was always a good indicator, and the same with colour as well. And then we'd be looking like runway reports and then retail. So when you're looking at the whole kind of like, I guess, timeline of stuff of when it's happening across fashion and how designers are working, you really get a kind of insight and a feel for what are the new trends that are happening.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, no, it is. It's kind of like it's not really like a science, but it's, I think some people, you just have kind of an eye for it, because I always just found that I was constantly like looking around and seeing what was happening. Like even if I was just at a festival, like with my friends, I'd always just be checking and what people are wearing, and like who are the new like musicians that are coming out, or like going to like exhibitions and watching new movies, and that all kind of like feeds into the research of what you're doing, because you're just keeping an eye on what's sort of happening throughout culture, and then it's just a case of joining the dots and like realizing what are going to be like those kind of like big influential waves of what's sort of happening in fashion.
Do you ever feel like exhausted by your own mind?
No, because it always just like stimulates me, and it's just, that's what I mean, it's just like something that I've always like naturally been looking at that stuff, because it's just, I don't know, I'm always excited and just like passionate about that stuff. So I never really kind of like have that off switch until like my wife now tells me sometimes I need to put down my phone, or like, stop going out all the time.
Yeah, I know, I've always found it hard because I feel like I always get a sort of curiosity peak in the evenings, but then I get so wired because you go deep into a rabbit hole, and then I can't sleep because there are all these thoughts, and I'm thinking, and I'm like, oh, and that thing, I should watch that, sort of. So I always have to be a bit more self-disciplined in terms of,
I think now you can get overstimulated sometimes as well, because it's just like there's so many different things that you can watch with like YouTube or being on Instagram and things like that. So
in terms of your trend foresight, can you essentially give one prediction for something that you think will happen in the future? Or
what that's currently happening now?
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of the things that's been interesting is like the whole like the Y2K like revival. Say with that, it's been going on for like years, but I think at the moment there's more of the thing of like the late like 2010s to like 2016, and that's kind of like my youth of like when I grew up. So it's quite funny to see that coming back at the moment.
I feel like my youth is like an Ouroboros.
Because this is the first time that I've lived through the actual trend that younger kids now are like tapping back into, but never. They always pick like the more random stuff that you never expect kind of to come back, which is quite interesting. But I think just trends in general now, they move much faster because of the access of information of what people have in terms of looking for like research. It's like people can use like Tumblr or Instagram or like YouTube and things like that. So the information that people can get. So the turnaround's much quicker. So I think it used to be that it was like every 20 years, like a trend would come back around. But now it seems like that becomes much faster because people are obviously getting through trends quicker, get bored quicker, and then always looking for something new.
Yeah, so do you think that compression of the trend cycle makes trends a bit more superficial? Do you think people's engagement with culture is, sort of more shallow?
Yeah, I did see something about that recently. I think I read an article, I think it was on Dazed or The Face, and they were talking about the micro trends that happen and like how shallow they are, because it used to be like if you were like in a subculture, say like punk or something like that, you're united with people who are into the same music, the same style, and there's a more of a deeper kind of connection, whereas now people, it's a bit more taken on like face value, that they, I guess, use like trends like trading cards now. It's like you could be into one thing, but then it's also another thing, and it's nice that there is that fluidity now and it's not so defined, but then there's less like depth I feel in terms of how people are connected to certain like trends or movements and things like that, that people just want it more as just like as an aesthetic thing, as opposed to really kind of like caring about the music or like the style or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I think that there is this sense of, people love to say that things were better in the past, and although I do think that it's not sort of like an entirely positive thing that the trend cycle has become so fast and so compressed, I also think that we're already starting to see this sort of almost new language of identification come out of where people are like, okay, anyone can access any trend in any subculture and mimic it. And so the nuances of how you communicate that you're genuinely a part of that are becoming so much more specific. And I think that watching that language start to develop is a really interesting offshoot of the fact that the trend cycle has become so both accessible and so compressed.
And I think people don't really care about trends so much now. There's been like over the past year, say, it's like there's been a big backlash against it, because I think people want to kind of reject trends now and just do something that's more kind of authentic to themselves, which is quite interesting. And people talking a lot more about like gatekeeping again, because obviously there is so much like access to information and anyone can find out about anything and say that they like know about it, but then it's like, then are they really kind of like part of like that subculture or movement or something like that? So I know I've been seeing some interesting discourse around that, which I think is interesting.
I'm going to take us back in history again. So when you were working at WGSN, you were the denim editor, is that right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about where your interest in denim stemmed from and that part of your career?
Yeah, so again, I think it's just like growing up, I was into kind of like sort of music movements and like the whole kind of like garage and like grime scene. I think it was like the rise of like Japanese denim had started to come through then with like a Visu. And I used to go to a lot of these like markets, and there was this one seller who used to sell them there, but I could never figure out whether they were like bootlegs or whether they were real. And I've since gone back and like looked at my jeans and I'm like, oh, they were definitely real. So they must have just been like stolen goods, and they were just like flipping them for really cheap, because I was getting like the Avisu jeans, which should have been like, I think £200 or whatever, and I was getting them for like 50, and the guys were always a bit shifty, and I was just like with my mum like 16 or whatever, like being like, oh, can I get these? And she's like, oh, they're a lot of money, but I'm just like, oh no, I really want to have them. And like that's where I kind of like, I guess my interest sort of stemmed into it. But then it was also growing up like skateboarding as well, with like baggy jeans and like everything that kind of came with like that culture of skateboarding, and like denim was obviously a big part of that. Doing my dissertation was like the point where I realised that I really enjoyed writing, because that was another thing that I hadn't really explored until I was at university, and I managed to get a first, which was good. So that just gave me the confidence in terms of the writing. So I think with the trend forecasting role, it's not only being able to like visually tell the stories, but you've also got to be able to articulate it as well, and like what does that mean, and how can people use like those trends and things like that. And that's definitely informed what I do on my page as well. In terms of the writing that I do there, because I try not to be too kind of like flowery with the writing. It's like just being very much more to the point and a bit more like open, that anyone can kind of read it and appeal, I guess, to like the tourist and the purist sort of thing. But I was always interested in like how denim kind of crossed over with culture and like music scenes and things like that. And so that's what I first started about on my Instagram page, because no one was really writing about these sort of periods of sort of like denim, I guess. But that was always this stuff that excited me. And I guess that's how like my page kind of sort of snowballed into being bigger than denim eventually, because I was just like, oh, like jeans cool, but then also there's like, you have vintage t-shirts that come with that. And so I'd start writing about those, and then it was like more beyond that with like the music and the artists and stuff. So it kind of expanded naturally, I guess. Because I didn't want to be just defined by one thing, even though I had a career, I guess, in denim for like 7 years before that. It was like I always had so many different interests beyond it. So I was just kind of like just testing stuff like each time with like a post, like, and how it kind of like people reacted with it.
So yeah, you were talking about expanding out from denim. So I want to talk about the process of creating one of your posts. So how long does the research take you? How long do you spend sort of putting it all together? How do you choose what to write about?
It can be anything from like, I can turn something around in like an hour if I've got the images like ready available then, and I can quickly type it up. But it can sometimes, I could be sitting on images for like a year if it's like a certain thing, and I'm just like, right, I'm just waiting to build something out, because it might just be there's like a seed of like an idea of something, and I'm just like, oh, I really like that. It could like an old like archive image or something, and then I'll be like, I wonder if that will come back or something, and then I'd have that image like folded, and then I'll start seeing a bit more, and then I start saving, and then once I've got like 10 or something, I'm like, oh right, then I've got enough of this, and then I can turn it around. But yeah, other times it could be like, I'd say like generally like half a day, I'd say probably sometimes, to put it all together and the researching of images, because I really care about like the quality of images, and I'm always trying to look around and make sure I've got enough breadth, and it's not like the obvious images that you might recognize for something, or like finding like a high quality one and having to do like Google image like reverse search for that, and like trying to find something from there. Or you could end up on Pinterest and then you go down like a rabbit hole and finding some other stuff. I say like, it could be like an hour to like half a day sometimes in general for putting them together. But I always kind of think about how they're kind of laid out in the carousel, because I try and sort of make the images kind of reflect what's happening in the text as well. So that that's what I really love about the format of Instagram, is that the images help kind of like sell the story first. So you've got to have a really good like hero image that's going to capture someone's attention, and then the text, again, you just got to do sort of nice storytelling with that. Especially like you mentioned the like ChatGPT and AI. People always just like sometimes like, oh, is this like AI generated? I'm like, no, I've like spent like loads of time writing this. So I always like try and make it a bit more, like to my style, I guess, in terms of like the writing. But yeah, it's annoying when people say that, because it's just like, I'm trying not to make it like that at all.
I loved the one you did recently about, was it infrared imagery being used in, I don't know, sort of artwork?
Yeah.
So an idea like that is less maybe tied to a particular, a fashion show or a trend or a launch. Where does something like that come from?
So again, that's just something like what I was saying, that I might have like, I don't know, like an ASAP Mob video that I've always like loved, and it's and that referenced a famous photographer who'd shot, I think, out in the Congo during like the early 2000s, and that was the inspiration with that. So again, it's like there's an obvious link there between those two, but then there might be other artists that start using it again now, and their influence made by like ASAP Rocky and what he was doing with his ones. So it's just like finding that thread sometimes, or I can just like Google search and try and find some other people that are using it. But with something like that, I'm generally just sort of saving images as and where I'm going, and just using my own kind of knowledge of like stuff that's happened in sort of like music or culture and things like that, and pulling them together. And again, it's like, that's not necessarily something that is going to be like a big trend, but it's something that I've kind of been noticing that kind of happens across sort of culture, and it's about joining like the past, the present, and sort of like the future, and how like people are using like art and technology in that kind of way.
Do you ever have a really annoying thing where you'll put together a post and then as soon as you post it, you see another example and you...
Yeah, I do get that quite often. I'm like, oh damn, if I just waited like a day, then I could have got one like that. But it's just like the pain of like creators like us that do stuff. Yeah, exactly. But sometimes it does pay off, because it's like you'll just have that one image that will just be that front cover one that you want to use, and it just ties that story together. Yeah.
I imagine.
But other stuff, I'm just like being reactive to stuff as well. So there might be something that I've got loads of images saved, and then someone like posts something, I'm like, oh right, this is like a good point to talk about it, because otherwise it could just be a completely random topic that like no one would just like, why are you posting about that? It's like, it's cool, but when it has something where someone's like currently doing it, then it just gives it a bit more leverage, because then you can tell that narrative of where something's come from, like the history behind it and the context, and it just adds a bit more value to it. Because that's generally what I do a lot of the time. It's like I'm just reading around and just being inquisitive and curious about different stuff, and it's just been nice to kind of like share that with the audience, and people care about the same stuff that I do too. Yeah.
You talk a lot about kind of your audience and the interaction that you have with them. What are the kind of conversations? Do you spend a lot of time replying to DMs in the comments, or do you kind of just post something and let it have a life of its own?
I try and sort of like respond to stuff as and when it kind of like warrants it, I guess, and it's nice. People always appreciate having like that interaction. Same like with DMs, I can't respond to like everything, but I try and like keep up with it as much as I can, because I think it just means a lot, and just like having that connection with the audience, even if it's like I'm just sending like a small reply back, like some people are just like, oh my god, like thank you for replying, I never thought you'd like see this, and it's like I try and keep on top of it and like respond as and when I can, because it's nice to have that dialogue, I think, with people. And I learn a lot from like the comments in the comment section. Sometimes I might get things wrong in like the write-ups, and it's nice having that kind of I guess like being able to like chat with people and find stuff out in the comments, and especially writing the text, that also I guess instigates people to comment a lot more as well, because I've obviously started like a dialogue in the text, and then it continues off in the conversation in the comments as well, which is cool.
Do you, I mean, you post about things that people have really kind of strong feelings about, and people are very naturally connected to culture, particularly subcultures, because it's such a personal thing. And sometimes, you know, I guess, I imagine sometimes you get negative comments. Does that bother you? What is the kind of negativity that you find? Yeah,
sometimes it can be. It's just, I guess, people, like you said, they really like care about stuff, and I think it's quite easy online for people just to go off in the comments. But I've just sort of learned just to let it be. It's like spiritual warfare. I think sometimes if you're trying to get into like these kind of like altercations with people in the comments, I've just kind of learned to just be a bit more kind of like reserved about it and not like react too much about stuff. But it's nice sometimes that if people, sometimes they're going off and trying to like say something about like the content or whatever, other people might back me up with like things who like other people the followers would just come in and say, no, this is right or whatever. And it's nice that you get like that from your audience, which is cool. But if it warrants it, sometimes I'll go in and I'll have like a little back and forth with people. But I don't like to do it too much because it's quite stressful.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you ever have to mediate between commenters who are fighting with each other, or you just let them have it out?
Sometimes I just let them have it out, and it's just like it'll just be going on for like days. And like, damn, these guys have really got a lot of time on their hands, or they really care about this. But it's nice though, because like you said, it's like when I do the post, it's either like I try and do like an element of surprise with something, of introducing something new that people might not have heard about, or it's looking back at something that's nostalgic and people would have that connection with it. And I love it when people sort of respond and say like, oh, this was like an amazing time in my life or whatever, and having that kind of like impact on someone's like emotions, or like just being able to bring back like positive memories in that kind of way.
My one is I can't listen to the Skins theme tune.
Oh really? It's too triggering.
It's not even triggering, it's just so visceral in terms of the nostalgia. Like I honestly feel like someone has like hooked something to my chest and like pulled me, you know?
But it's cool that you, like with a post like that you can have that impact on someone, and it's like you might hear their stories of like when they lived through that. I love especially when people do that, if like they tell like something like their memories of like how they lived through that moment, or just bringing a little bit of information that I might not know myself about it.
Are there characters that you keep coming back to in the Samutaro universe?
What, in terms of people that I post about a lot?
Yeah, people or topics that you just feel like, now you've been doing it for, I guess, how long was it? Over 10 years.
Yeah.
There are people that you write about frequently.
Or say like Tyler, he's someone that I've always been writing about and covering like the lore, I guess, of like his career, like from Odd Future through to what he's doing now. I've got quite a lot of hashtags that I will usually put in the comments as well. If it is like I don't know, like say like sneakers or like car culture, or like Tyler, I've got like a hashtag for him, or Virgil, there's another one where you can go through and look back at all of the posts that I have, because that's the only thing with Instagram that you can't I guess, categorize stuff. Everything just gets buried down the feed eventually. So I've been trying to sort of figure out some sort of system so that people can go back and look at stuff. And the same in highlights, I categorize those so you can look back. But yeah, Tyler's someone that I've always like loved, and being able to sort of like, follow like his career and writing about all of the, because he's got such like a cult following, I think. So there's so much interesting stuff, and like with his lyrics and the different kind of like characters that he creates with his kind of artwork, there's so much to explore with him, and people just nerd out on it so much. There's like amazing Reddit pages where you can find out like really obscure information. So people always love to have that kind of like look back on like his career or like what he's doing now, as well as like kind of like throwback like nostalgic posts as well. Like I did one recently, I think when he did the box logo campaign for Supreme, I just looked back at like that era of like the early 2010s when he was wearing Supreme and being on like Fairfax with the whole like Odd Future crew, because that was like such a big moment. I remember for me like looking on like YouTube at like the Odd Future videos then, and like their Tumblr pages, and it was the first time that people could really be connected, I guess, with like an artist or a group like that, because of like social media allowed it. And I think the way that Odd Future were kind of expressing themselves on there, it almost felt like you were living through those moments with them. So like say if you do a throwback post on that, people would just like love that kind of stuff, because they're just like, oh, this remembers like when I was in like high school or whatever, and like queuing up in like the queue for like Supreme or whatever, and like buying bits that Tyler had or whatever. So people really have like a personal connection with those moments.
So is there a particular type of post that people really respond well to, or you feel like, I always hate using the term like performs really well, because it sounds so
like something like that, I guess, like I'd say like a throwback one that's connected to like culture. I did another one on like the kind of statement logo hats, like the ASAP Rocky, like when he used to have that, like the "Come the Fuck Down" one, and
that's
like
coming
that
back. Honestly, I was.
So that's another one. I'd just been seeing like these girls that started wearing them again, and I was just like, no way, like are they going to come back? Because that was just like such a niche trend that was like happening around like 2013.
And then the homies jump.
Like the black scale hats and things like that. So that was just another one. It was just like, that was such a big moment then, and I was just like, no one's writing about that now, so it would just be a good time to look back on that. And again, it's like, it's not random, because there's certain, I guess, like content creators who are starting to bring like those items back. So there is that thread that you can say, oh, this is happening now, and it's part of like the bigger kind of like revival of like the 2010s or whatever.
Going back to your...
But I try not to be too kind of like sensational with posts. I was just like, go with my intuition and post about things that I'm genuinely interested in. I think it's quite easy to get trapped in stuff that you just think is going to perform well, and you can do that, but I always just prefer to like tell like other kind of like deeper stories, or just things that I'm kind of generally interested in.
Yeah, I think that is why your account feels different from, because these days there are a lot of, not necessarily copycat accounts, but it's become a lot more sort of ironically trending to post about trends or archival research and things, and I feel like yours doesn't feel clickbaity. It feels very organically in line with the moment without feeling like, oh, this is what everyone's talking about, this will make people click kind of thing.
And I think if anything, it's like there's more of like a rejection of kind of like the big kind of like celebrity culture. People are much more interested in what's kind of happening more like grassroots level, and there's loads of cool like people that aren't even like really kind of talked about on pages. So that's what I'm trying to do more now, is like focus on more emerging kind of artists, and when they're kind of about to blow, like catching them early.
Going back to your career arc, when did you decide to go freelance and do your own thing, and what was that decision like?
So I'd left, I think, WGSN in 2017, and I was working with Amy Leviton, who's the lady who first got me my job in trend forecasting. She's got her own platform called Denim Dude. So I was doing some freelance work. We're working full time with her actually, because we managed to get like a retainer that we were working on at the time. So I was working full time with her doing like denim trend forecasting, and I still work with her now, doing like working with Levi's. They're like a client we work with every year. But then when the pandemic happened, that retainer got pulled, but I'd already started my page at that point, and I think I had like 10k followers, but I think I'd started to just get a few kind of like brands that are approaching me about doing some sort of like deals then for like paid content, and I was like, oh, maybe this is like an opportunity where I can do more with that. So I started leaning into it then. And I think during the pandemic, I was posting like 3 times a day and just like
Wow.
cranking out the content and just trying to like grow like the page a lot more. And I got a few good opportunities, like with Grailed, I was doing some like collab posts with them, and other pages just reposting the content that I was creating, and that just kind of like made it spiral, and yeah, the following just went up, and then obviously you get more opportunities with brands at that point. Yeah,
because that's something I'm interested to talk about without wanting you to give away
Yeah.
all your secret sauce, but it's one thing to build a really popular page, but then turning that into a business, like how have you done that, and what is the business model for you that comes from
it was kind of like a learning curve really, because I didn't really know like how to monetize it, and that was never really like the original intention with it. But I guess at that point when I didn't have any sort of like income coming in, I was just like, maybe there's a way that I can try and sort of try to monetize it in like an authentic and organic way, and that's always kind of been my approach with when I'm creating content. And I think with the long form captions and the storytelling that I do, and just sort of coming from an authentic place in terms of how I approach the writing, that lends itself quite well in terms of how brands want themselves to be positioned and how they want like people to read about their brands. So there's just a really good opportunity, I think, because brands never really know how to talk about themselves, I think, sometimes. So they like a third party person to be that narrator and tell it in an authentic way for them. So, and naturally a lot of the times I'm talking about brands, so it's not always like paid content of what I'm doing on the page. It's like I'm just writing about stuff that I like. Cause it's like, I don't know, like, so like Nike sneakers in like hardcore cultures is something that I'm generally like interested in writing, and that wouldn't be a paid post, but then brands might see that and they're like, oh, can you do this? But we've got another drop coming up. Is there some storytelling that we could do with this product?
And do you help them?
And that's the main thing, of just being able to have that good storytelling, I think, with something, because I turn down a lot of work if there's no real substance to it, or like how can that live on the page without it looking like really like a paid post, I guess.
Yeah. And do you also do that for other people? So when brands need help on their own channels with their storytelling, do you help
I do
them
do some
craft
stuff.
that?
Yeah, I've worked with some brands in terms of like writing press releases. There's a couple of brands that have done more kind of like behind the scenes work for that, or like consultancy stuff on what kind of things that they should be looking at, and I guess more of like what I was doing like at WGSM, but doing that with brands as well.
Do you have any big goals or a project that you really want to do?
Uh,
I don't know, like a book or
Yeah,
an
a lot
exhibition?
of people have been saying about a book, and that's something I've always wanted to do. And I think I've got enough content now where I could probably do like a few different, like, I think I'd probably do them by different categories in terms of the subjects that I like cover, because there's, like we talked about earlier, there's a few repeating things. Like I could do one on cars, or there could be a whole one on like Odd Future or something like that, and like the lore of that. So I think I'd like to do editions like that, and then there'd be opportunity, I think, of doing like some merch that would go alongside that, because I think that's just another thing of just having like a physical product that people can buy, because at the moment it's just, there's no real tangible aspect to it apart from being an Instagram page that people follow. Whereas if you can give people like a memento, I guess, or like a physical object that they can take away from it.
I imagine that no 2 days are the same, but what is the kind of structure of your days, your weeks, your years?
Yeah.
Are there particular busy periods? Are there certain events that you attend every year? Do you have a very rigid routine, sort of daily routine?
Yeah, I'd say like the main daily routine is sort of just my general research of what I'm doing, of like looking online, and then the writing and the story building in terms of how I'm creating the content. But a lot of, I'm very fortunate to get to do a lot of travel with the job. And it could be like, say, January is always like a busy period because I'm doing Pitti Uomo first. That's like second week of January. Then I'm into, like, it could be going to Milan and then Paris Fashion Week. And then that's the same again in June. But then throughout that, there's usually different opportunities of, I don't know, like I got invited to go to like a Vans showcase in LA last week for a launch they did of their old school. And then it could be like going to like an archive for like Puma or something like that. Or like we got to go on the Adidas trip together, like over to America, and it's just like, there's so many cool opportunities that come up with it. And that was another reason why I was like, I should lean more into this and make this a full-time thing. Because before it was like, I was still doing other freelance stuff, and it's like, the more that you put into the page, the more you get out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Is there a particular career moment or highlight that stands out for you?
Probably I'd have to say, I don't know, like Tyler's always been like someone that I've always like admired as like an artist, but then he popped up in my DMs I think during the pandemic, and I thought it was just like a fan account, and he'd basically like DM me off his main account, and he was just like, I love what you do, like you should like do more than the Instagram page, like you should do like a book or something like that. And it was just really cool to have someone like him come and just give me like recognition like that. It wasn't like he was trying to get anything out of me, it was just like just giving me sort of motivation to keep doing what I'm doing. And just I guess he was saying that he's just like a nerd and that he loves to like read around into like different subcultures and stuff, and he's like, you're the same, like you get it kind of thing. And then I think like a year later, he messaged me and he's just like, oh, come to LA, I've got this event. And I was just like, well, what is it kind of thing? And it ended up being the Golf Le Fleur. He couldn't kind of give away too much when he asked me, but he was like, I've got a new kind of like big moment that's coming out. So I ended up going over to LA for that. And I think I just paid for my flights because they weren't like offering that. But then I was just like, this would just be an amazing opportunity to go out there and like meet him and cover that, because there wasn't any other Instagram pages that he'd invited out to do it. So I think it was like me, there was like Vogue, there was another magazine that was there, but then that was it, I think, in terms of people that were like media that were covering it. So he gave me a really good opportunity as well in terms of like the content of what I could kind of create from that. And it was just such a sick moment, like when I pulled up to like the event, and it was in this vineyard in Malibu, and you kind of arrived in this car park, and then there was these vintage Rolls Royces that came and like picked you up, and then it took you up the hill. And then when I arrived at the top, it had like all of his like cars that he like got in his collection. So I was just like, oh my God, like this is sick. And then when we parked up, like he came over and like personally greeted me.
No way.
Yeah, which was like, I just kind of had to brace myself at that point and just like be like don't fan out too much now. But again, it was just like cool to be able to like connect with him at that moment and just sort of like share that with him.
Did you guys have a chat?
Yeah, we had like a chat, because I think I was one of like the first to arrive there. So yeah, it was just cool that he gave me the time, like showed me through all the collection, and just got to like know him a bit better, which was cool. So I wouldn't say he's like my friend or anything. I'm not like down with him like that. But if there's ever like moments where he's at like Paris Fashion Week or in London, if we see each other, he always like says, "What's up?"
What would you say have been the biggest lessons in terms of the time that you've been doing this? I suppose the time that you've been solely focused on your page.
Yeah.
I imagine there have been certain moments of growth or lessons you've learned in a good way, lessons you've learned in a hard way.
I'd say the main thing's like the consistency with Instagram, because it's with the algorithm, you just gotta, the more you post, like the more engagement you're getting with it. But again, it's not about just like clickbaity stuff. I think what I've realised is just the quality over quantity, because with the nature of what I do, I think with the write-ups, you can't like just churn that stuff out like every day. Like when it was the pandemic, I had more time in my hands and I could do it then. But now it's just like, even if I do like one good post a day, like that's enough for me. Whereas other pages, they might be doing, I don't know, 5 or something. But I think, just focusing more on just like the quality of what I do, because I don't have maybe as many followers as some of the other pages, but I think in terms of the value of what I offer people and what they take away from it, it's just, more of just like doing like one decent post and making sure that one's just like the best it could be kind of thing.
And also I guess it's like you have to give people time to actually read and absorb it.
Exactly, yeah.
Everyone is time poor, particularly when you're on social media and everything's vying for your attention. So if you give people too much, I have this because I am really in the like newsletter world, and there are some new newsletters that I really love, but some of them, they almost publish like too much, where I think, I really want to keep up, but I just don't have time to read all this. And then that almost, I feel kind of disloyal in a way, because I'm like, I really love this creator, but I just can't keep up with too much content.
Yeah, and I think sometimes if I've tried to do stuff too quickly and I haven't like properly researched or not like writing it correctly, then there sometimes can be backlash and stuff. And then you're like, oh damn, I wish I just like spent a bit more time like just crafting that out a bit and making sure it was just like the best it could be.
What is your culture diet, I guess they call it?
What, in terms of what I'm sort of reading?
Yeah, or how do you, people often talk about creativity and ideas, and they say you have to keep filling up the well.
Yeah.
And so I suppose what are you looking at in terms of what are your main, you don't have to give away all of your sources, but what are the main resources? Are you reading vintage magazines? Are you watching a lot of films? Is there a particular newsletter or podcast that you're really into? Obviously, if you say threads of conversation, that's great.
Yeah.
But also, how do you make sure that you are continually, I don't know, giving yourself enough time to rest and stay inspired and stay sharp?
Yeah.
Is that something you have to focus on? Do you have techniques around that?
I'd say a lot of the stuff, it's like I'm on Instagram a lot and like just saving stuff on there. And the biggest thing for me is just being able to like organize and like categorize a lot of the research that I'm finding, because I see like so much like every day, and there's like a lot of good ideas that come out of it, but then sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming of like, what do I do with this information and what am I going to write about today? Because there's so much sometimes. So I've tried to get better in terms of like foldering stuff, and the same, I use Pinterest a lot, and Tumblr, and then just like Google search is like another thing where I'm constantly like looking around on there, I'd say, for research stuff. And just generally like being out and about, like being in London's always super inspiring. There's so much in terms of inspiration you can get of like galleries, or just like walking around Soho sometimes quite good, just because if you're online all the time, sometimes it's nice to see what's actually real and what's sort of happening in terms of going into like stores or seeing what people are wearing, or going to like events and stuff like that. And I try and do a lot more interviews in person with people now as well. So like it could be like meeting an artist or like a musician, and a lot of like ideas or conversations can come up from like those like meetings with people, which is cool. Yeah.
And you run a lot as well.
And I run a lot as well. Yeah, that's kind of like something I don't really do too much in terms of content, because it's like I want to keep it a bit more pure, I guess, because it's just something that I generally enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And that time when I get up and I run in the morning is usually when I have like the most ideas, because I think you just have that clarity in your mind, because there's nothing else that you really kind of think about at that point. I'm not on my phone, and just sort of like in the zone at that point. Yeah.
Do you stop and write them down, or do they kind
No,
of stay
usually I'll just have it in my thoughts while I'm running, and then when I get back, and then I sit down at my desk after like washing, and then I'm just like, right, I can go over that.
Yeah. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been a morning person. I have so much energy in the mornings.
Yeah.
So that's when I just like to get to work and stuff, and like do my exercise, and that's my routine of how I like to start the day. I don't really drink coffee or anything either, because it's just like I've always had that natural energy in the morning. So
yeah, I'm the same. If I drink coffee,
I don't want to like mess up my system.
Yeah.
That's why I've always been wary about having it.
Also, I feel like when I have this joke, when I have a coffee, it's like whatever then crosses my path immediately afterwards, I'll latch onto it in such a, so it could be an email that literally doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And just all my focus will go on there. Whereas when I don't drink coffee, I have a bit more of a filter where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to put my energy onto that. That's the thing I need to focus on, you know? Whereas the caffeine gives me no choice. It's just like, oh, there's something.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, don't worry, we're coming to the end of the interview, so I'll stop grilling you soon.
Okay.
But I guess lastly, you're someone that people look up to a lot and people really admire what you do. What kind of advice would you give to someone wanting to emulate a career like yours?
Yeah, I guess like for me, the biggest thing is just the kind of curiosity and just wanting to explore something that maybe you might not necessarily have the confidence to do, but I've always found like the biggest opportunities that I've had come up are just when I push myself out of my comfort zone, just sort of like, just, I don't know, it could be like going to like a night out or something that you didn't necessarily want to go to, but then going there you could meet someone that could end up like, I don't know, you end up working with or something like that. And just, I'd say like the consistency as well, like when you get a job, just really work hard at it. Don't be afraid to do like unpaid work. I did a lot of like internships. I think it's really good to kind of like learn like the craft and the trade of what it is that you want to do. There was like a few different like career things. I went into like hairdressing at one point. I thought that was going to be something that I was going to do, but then I ended up being like, oh, I want to work in fashion. But I think when you're young, it's like just try different things and really figure out what you want to do, because I think most of the time when you're working, it's like what probably 60% of your life, so you want to be doing something that you enjoy. So I think it's good to kind of figure that out at like a early age of really being able to like get a career or something that you really want to be able to do. Because I'm so lucky to do like my job, and it's something that I'm passionate about and something that I've built out of a passion project as well. I just feel super lucky to be able to do this sort of thing, and it doesn't feel like work a lot of the time. So if you can find something like that, then you're on a good trip for work.
Yeah, wise words. Well, thank you so much, Sam. Thanks for coming on Threads of Conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Threads of Conversation. Hit the link in the show notes to read the accompanying newsletter, and don't forget to subscribe for more Threads of Conversation.